Across the desert of northwestern Saudi Arabia, a city was drawn as a single line, not around the landscape, but directly through it. The original vision stretched for 170 kilometers from the Red Sea region across valleys and mountains. It was presented as two parallel walls only 200 meters apart, rising 500 meters above the ground, and eventually containing as many as 9 million residents. No roads, no private cars, daily needs within a short walk, high-speed transport running through the structure. Those numbers made the line one of the most recognizable architectural proposals of the 21st century. They also created a powerful illusion that the project could be understood simply by looking at its shape. But a city is not a shape. It is an enormous network of foundations, water, power, ventilation, schools, hospitals, deliveries, waste systems, emergency routes, maintenance crews, laws, finances, and human habits. The real story begins when the perfect line on the map encounters irregular ground. The line belongs to NEOM, the vast development region created as part of Saudi Arabia's attempt to diversify its economy beyond oil. Its location is not an empty sheet of paper. The Northwest contains coastal ecosystems, desert plateaus, wadis, settlements, and mountain ranges. Over the full proposed distance, the structure would cross changing rock, changing elevations, changing winds, and changing relationships with water. Planned cities have always been political objects. Alexandria projected a new Hellenistic order onto the Mediterranean. Constantinople reorganized imperial power around a strategic strait. Brasilia transformed a national capital into a modernist symbol. Each began as a vision of control. Each became more complicated when real people occupied it. The line extends that tradition to an unprecedented geometry. Instead of spreading streets across land, it proposes compressing the city vertically. Homes, offices, parks, schools, transit, and public spaces would be arranged in layers. The urban footprint would be narrow, while the inhabited volume would rise hundreds of meters. The official argument is elegant. If destinations are close, people travel less. If the city is compact, more surrounding land can remain undeveloped. If transport runs through a central spine, the car can disappear. But every efficiency promised by the form creates another engineering dependency. Begin with the foundations. A conventional tower concentrates its loads on one site. The line's original end state would require foundation systems repeated across a distance longer than many metropolitan regions. Geologists would need to understand not one plot, but a continuous corridor through rock, sediment, slopes, drainage channels, and potentially faulted ground. Where the bedrock changes, the foundation design changes. Where valleys interrupt the route, the structure must bridge, descend, or transform. Every joint must accommodate movement. Every segment must respond to wind, temperature, vibration, and differential settlement without allowing a local problem to travel through the larger system. Then comes material. A structure 500 meters high demands enormous quantities of concrete, reinforcement, structural steel, glass, cables, pipes, and mechanical equipment. Producing, transporting, placing, and curing those materials in desert conditions would be a project within a project. The carbon cost of construction would also have to be measured against the long-term environmental claims of the completed city. Heat changes the problem. Desert surfaces expand under intense sun and contract at night. Dust enters joints, machinery, ventilation equipment, and facade systems. Wind drives sand against exposed materials. A mirrored exterior may appear smooth in a rendering, but at full scale it becomes a maintenance surface measured not in stories, but in kilometers. The mirror is more than decoration. It is the public symbol of the line, a technological wall reflecting the mountains and desert. Yet reflections change by hour, season, weather, and viewing angle. Glass must be supported, sealed, cleaned, inspected, repaired, and replaced. Its behavior toward heat, glare, and wildlife must be managed over decades. Inside the walls, daylight becomes an urban resource. A canyon 200 meters wide and 500 meters high creates extreme differences between sun and shade. Upper levels may receive powerful light while lower spaces depend on carefully designed openings, reflective surfaces, or artificial illumination. Ventilation must move air through a dense vertical environment without turning every public space into a mechanical chamber. Cooling would be continuous and essential. So would power. Elevators, pumps, trains, ventilation fans, data systems, hospitals, refrigeration, and water treatment cannot pause because the city is compact. A failure in an ordinary neighborhood affects several streets. A failure inside a single interconnected megastructure could affect entire vertical districts. Mobility is the central promise. The original concept advertised a life without cars and suggested that most daily needs would be reachable within 5 minutes. Longer journeys would use high-speed transit along the line, but linear geometry concentrates movement. Instead of many possible routes across a street network, passengers repeatedly enter the same transport spine, platforms, elevators, and transfer points. At quiet hours, that system could feel effortless. At the beginning of a workday, after a major event, or during an emergency, the same efficiency could become a bottleneck. Capacity would depend not only on train speed, but on station spacing, dwell time, vertical circulation, redundancy, and the number of alternative paths available when one route closes. Water creates another chain of dependence. The region is arid. Large populations would require desalination, pumping, storage, treatment, and recycling. Water produced near the coast would need to reach residential, commercial, landscape, cooling, and fire protection systems at different elevations and distances. Wastewater would have to return through an equally reliable network. Energy plans emphasize renewable sources, but the question is not only how much electricity can be generated. It is when that electricity is available, how it is stored, how it is distributed, and how critical systems survive disruption. A city designed as a unified machine needs backup systems that are deliberately less unified. Fire safety reveals the importance of separation. Tall buildings rely on protected stairs, smoke control, compartmentation, refuge areas, emergency lifts, and access for responders. In the line, those principles would have to work across a continuous urban form. The architecture must prevent the visual idea of one city from becoming the operational reality of one undivided risk. The same applies to deliveries and waste. A car-free public realm does not eliminate movement, it relocates it. Food, medical supplies, building materials, furniture, maintenance parts, and refuse still travel. Service routes must remain close enough to every neighborhood while staying invisible enough to preserve the promised pedestrian environment. Engineering can calculate many of these systems. The more difficult question is whether it can calculate urban life. A city is shaped by encounters that were never included in the master plan. A shop that survives because people change their route. A neighborhood that develops its own rhythm. A public square that becomes important for reasons no designer predicted. The line promises proximity, but proximity alone does not create community. Its interior could offer remarkable spaces, gardens protected from the desert, shaded streets, schools above transport hubs, homes close to work, and public terraces facing mountains or sea. It could also produce environments where access, movement, climate, and visibility are managed by a limited number of systems. Efficiency and control would occupy the same architecture. The landscape outside the structure also has a human history. The NEOM region has long been inhabited, including by members of the Habitat community. United Nations experts and human rights organizations have raised allegations concerning eviction, consultation, and treatment of residents connected to land acquisition for the project. Saudi authorities have disputed allegations surrounding the development. The controversy is a reminder that no line drawn across territory begins on empty ground. The construction workforce creates another moral and practical test. Projects of this scale depend on large numbers of migrant workers operating in heat, dust, and remote sites. Rights organizations have documented wider concerns in Saudi gigaprojects involving recruitment costs, wages, safety, and access to remedy. The quality of a future city cannot be separated from the conditions under which it is built. Ecology adds uncertainties that a rendering cannot resolve. The Northwest links desert, mountain, and Red Sea habitats. A continuous barrier, transport corridor, lighting system, and reflective facade may affect animal movement, birds, drainage, and local microclimates. Mitigation requires field data collected over seasons, not only promises made at the design stage. This is why the difference between a visualization and a construction photograph matters. The famous images of the line show a completed world, mature vegetation, populated terraces, perfect glass, and seamless transport. On the ground, progress has consisted of planning, infrastructure, excavation, foundations, logistics, and early-stage works. These are real achievements, but they are not the finished city shown in the concept art. The official language has also changed. NEOM now describes the line as a multi-generational, multi-phase development advancing through a phased, demand-led approach. That wording matters. It replaces the image of one rapid construction campaign with the reality of a project that may be tested, revised, and built in sections over a much longer period. On April 15, 2026, the governor of Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund said the line was no longer a priority for completion by 2030. He also said projects had not been canceled. The distinction is crucial. The original 170-kilometer ambition remains part of the vision, but its timing, scale, sequence, and financial priority are no longer fixed in the way early promotional material suggested. A phased city may be more realistic. It can test transport, facade behavior, cooling, public space, and residential demand before repeating the system. But a short segment also changes the central promise. The benefits of an ultra-long linear network cannot be demonstrated by a conventional district, while the risks of the full length cannot be measured until the structure grows far beyond the first phase. Near the far edge of the vision stands one of its most extraordinary planned elements, NEOM Stadium. Saudi Arabia's successful bid for the 2034 FIFA World Cup describes a stadium integrated into the line, with its pitch more than 350 meters above ground, a planned gross capacity of 46,010, and construction completion proposed for 2032. It is not a stadium floating independently in the sky. In the bid concept, it is wrapped by the city's infrastructure. That integration makes the image more credible and the engineering more demanding. Tens of thousands of spectators would need transport, vertical access, evacuation capacity, power, water, security, and emergency services inside a city segment that must already be operational. The stadium may become a deadline that forces part of the larger idea to become concrete, or the surrounding design may change to meet the tournament's practical requirements. Either outcome would reveal how megaprojects evolve. The symbol survives, but the system around it adapts. History offers no simple verdict. Planned capitals and monumental cities are often criticized before they are built, transformed after they open, and judged differently generations later. Some become living places precisely because residents ignore parts of the original plan. Others remain impressive objects that never produce the social world their designers imagined. The line does not need to reach 170 kilometers to influence architecture. Even a partial realization could test new forms of density, automation, climate control, and car-free movement. But partial success should not be confused with completion of the original promise. The evidence must always distinguish what was announced, what was redesigned, what is under construction, and what people can actually use. Perhaps the greatest mystery of the line is not whether engineers can raise walls in the desert. It is whether a city designed as one perfect system can become a living, unpredictable human place. The line on the map is still visible, but its meaning has changed. It is no longer only a confident image of the future. It is a long experiment in what happens when ambition meets geology, climate, money, labor, ecology, and time.